And we played trick after trick after trick. I'd loosen his saddle because he hated horses. He hated rice.
He was born Charles Robert Redford, Jr., August 18, 1936, in Santa Monica, California, a seaside boy on the lip of Hollywood, within earshot of a dream factory he wouldn't approach, head-on so much as circle, test, and finally remake. In his own image. His mother, Martha Hart, a freelance illustrator with a gentle touch, taught him to see. His father, Charles Sr., a lab tech and chemist, taught him to stand between art and discipline, a temperament formed, restless, exacting, hungry for shape and meaning. He grew up modestly, no silver spoon, no studio gate pass, just the coastline, the light, the long avenues of Southern California laying out possibilities. He drew, he imagined, he drifted toward performance without yet knowing he was drifting. At Van Nuys High, he found the stage. At the University of Colorado, he flirted with architecture, the geometry of space, the ethics of building, and discovered that what he really wanted to design was feeling. New York called. The American Academy of Dramatic Arts gave him tools and a seriousness of purpose. Auditions gave him splinters and small breaks. Television taught him how to hit a mark and share the scene. Then the camera fell in love. By the late 1960s and early 70s, he was no longer simply handsome, he was a new American type, sun-kissed, but skeptical. A rebel whose rebel yell you could barely hear because it sounded like thoughtfulness. As the Sundance Kid in Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, 1969, he wore danger lightly and friendship like armor. With Paul Newman at his side, he connected charm to conscience and made the buddy picture feel like history with a heartbeat. They did it again in The Sting, 1973, a caper served with champagne and poker smoke, two men on a grifter's tightrope, all balance and timing and secret smiles. But Redford was more than a poster, or rather, he made the poster mean something. All the President's Men, 1976, asked a country to look at its own reflection. He stared back on our behalf and didn't blink. The Natural, 1984, gave myth a man's face and grace a swing. Out of Africa, 1985, made romance an argument between adventure and equilibrium. He toggled between interiors, ethics, grief, intimacy, and exteriors, plains, ballparks, continents, and made them feel continuous, as if the landscape were just another interior he happened to carry in his chest. And then he did the most subversive thing a movie star can do. He built a home for other people's voices. In 1980, he founded the Sundance Institute, a quiet revolution framed as a workshop. What began as a lifeline for independent storytellers became an ecosystem, labs, mentorships, and the Sundance Film Festival, a winter migration to Utah where movies that didn't fit the old mold learned to breathe. When he directed Ordinary People that same year, cool, precision, hothouse feeling, he proved his own thesis that restraint can be devastating, that the camera is a listener when you let it be. He directed again and again The Milagro Beanfield War, 1988. A River Runs Through It, 1992. Quiz Show, 1994. The Horse Whisperer, 1998. Weaving moral weather into everyday skies, he didn't pound the pulpit. He pointed and trusted the audience to follow the finger. His personal life braided quieter narratives. In 1958, he married Lola Van Wagenen in Las Vegas, then gathered family for a second reception a month later. There were 4 children. There was heartbreak so early it still knocks the wind out of a sentence. Scott, gone in infancy. Shauna, who paints. James, a writer and filmmaker whose passing in 2020 pulled a long shadow across the light. Amy, an artist across disciplines. The marriage stretched, shifted, and eventually relinquished its shape in private, an unannounced drifting apart that suited 2 people who guarded what mattered. In 2009, he married Sybille Sagers, an artist whose own practice met his in quiet, companionable ways. Life, for Redford, always had rooms beyond the one with the camera. And yet, for all the rooms he built, for all the chapters he lived, There is one partnership audiences return to with the affection of family, Redford and Newman. Two faces on a marquee, yes, but more than that, two philosophies in rhyming couplet, Newman, with ice blue mischief and a civic spine, Redford, with sun gold reserve, and an instinct for the invisible seam that makes a scene hang together. Together, they were ease. Together, they were work disguised as ease. At 89, Redford finally spoke in a way that sounded like an exhale, not a confession, not a tell-all, but a benediction. He reached backward to where the reel began and lifted moments like photographs, holding each to the light until the grain showed. Paul made everyone better, he has said in various ways over the years. Now, older, the line lands with weight. In the late-day hush of memory, he describes an unspoken understanding, how beats could be traded without calling them beats, how a laugh could be set like a snare so the other man would step right into it, how a serious scene could be felt rather than diagrammed. Between them, ego became ballast, not sail. They cut each other's indulgence with a look, raised each other's game with a shrug. On Butch Cassidy. The myth is that everything was easy. The truth, Redford recalls, is that it was play. And play is discipline with its shoes off. Days were long and dust-tangled. Improvisation wasn't license so much as permission to be human. Newman would toss a glint across the frame. Redford would catch it like a shortstop and flick something back. The camera, conspirator that it is, fell in love with the conversation. On the sting, they were craftsmen making elegance look like luck. Redford remembers hours of talk, motives, stakes, the tiny mechanics of trust between con men who don't fully trust anyone. On set, they left room for accident, and the accidents felt designed. Off set, they needled and nurtured. If one of them was dragging, the other told a worse joke just to let the day laugh and move on. The work was public. The friendship was private. They didn't feed the press the language of brotherhood. They lived it. Redford speaks of calls in the quiet hours, of advice offered without performance, of a gentleness in Newman that could hide behind the grin but never disappeared. The causes that became synonymous with Newman, philanthropy by the truckload, Redford remembers as an extension of the man, not a costume he wore. Success, Redford now says, is measured by kindness, integrity, and the impact you have on people. A thesis he credits to the example set across the decades by the friend who never mistook fame for goodness or goodness for something that needed to be announced. In telling these stories, Redford isn't polishing legend. He's coursing through its wiring. He admits what we all sense. Longevity in any relationship, personal or creative, requires generosity. One goes first, the other follows, then they switch. On screen, it looked like rhythm. Off screen, it looked like respect that didn't need applause. It's not that they never disagreed. Artists of their caliber don't live in lockstep. But the disagreements were quiet, subsumed into the shared belief that the movie comes first. We didn't work for each other, Redford suggests with a half smile. We worked with each other. The difference is everything. You can hear the editor in him, trim what's showy, keep what serves. He speaks, too, of age, not as a surrender, but as a vantage point. At 89, time flattens and deepens. The early hunger that once drove him to every set is now a steady appetite for meaning. When he looks at Sundance, the labs, the festival, the careers that began in the cold with breath like smoke, he sees not his brand, but a commons he helped fence and water. When he looks at the movies he directed, he doesn't tally trophies. He remembers faces on monitors. The moment an actor found the line beneath the line. When he looks at Newman, he sees a man who taught him, without speeches, how to be large without being loud. The nostalgia here isn't sugar. It's salt. Redford knows the cost of longevity, children gone too soon, marriages that needed to change shape, a country whose sins he has asked us to look at through film after film. But he also knows the daily mercies, a set that hums, a crew that smiles when they rap, a friend who shows up and sits and says, "What do you need?" He talks about Newman that way. Presence as gift, no grand gestures, no orchestral strings, Just a man who came through the door when it mattered and left the place warmer. He circles back, finally, to that first great run, Butch and Sundance, and the peculiar afterlife of roles that become nicknames. For years, strangers greeted him by the name of a partnered myth. He didn't mind. He shared the myth. When Newman died, the world mourned a star. Redford mourned the timing of his own life. Altered. You can hear it now, in the way he threads gratitude into grief. What a privilege to have played with him, to have worked with him, to have lived beside him long enough to see the friendship accrue a patina, then a polish, then a gentle worn spot where your thumb always rests. The reel keeps running. We drift through Colorado River water in A River runs through it, past game show lights and quiz show, across the Montana range where a whisperer heals horses by first listening to people. We glance at lions for lambs, the conspirator, the company you keep, projects chosen for argument more than adulation, even late-career acting turns, heists, politics, old men contending with new storms, feel like variations on a single question. What does it mean to remain yourself when the world keeps changing, the lighting? At 89, Robert Redford finally says aloud what his work has been saying for 60 years, that a life is not a headline, but a through line, that the best partners don't merely share the frame, they sharpen it, and that the measure of a man is not how brightly he shone, but how many others learn to see by his light. And in that light, Paul Newman still stands, easy, amused, unpretentious, tilting his head toward the friend who, for once, is doing the talking.